Hi, and welcome to STEM Stories from Mr. Ewing. The Brain by Suzanne Levert. It's a very interesting coverage of the mechanics or the working parts of the brain. Kind of goes a little bit in depth, not as in depth as you possibly could. So, at any point we talk about something, we cover something that you want to know more about, take a moment, exercise your brain, do a little research. The Brain by Suzanne Levert. Now, the table of contents. So this is a little bit different than a lot of the other read alouds that I've done. This is actually a book of nonfiction. So the table of contents is super important. So the things that we're going to cover today are thought, emotion, and movement, the brain and the spinal cord, you've got some nerve, how nerves work, when things go wrong, keep moving, thinking and moving, the glossary, find out more in the index. Now in this read aloud, we will not be covering the glossary, find out more, which has different links and other information, or the index. So let's jump in. Thought, movement, emotion, and movement. Your brain is a remarkably complicated organ. Did you know it was an organ? It is where you feel emotions such as love and anger. It is where you think, decide, remember, and dream. Your brain also sends signals in the form of nerve impulses to every area of your body. These signals tell your body what to do, how to move, when, and how to smile. It's a pretty powerful organ. And I wonder, have you ever thought about your brain as an organ? I know we think about our lungs and our stomach and other organs in our body, but sometimes even I forget that our brain is an organ. In fact, your brain and the rest of your body are alive with billions of electrical and chemical signals that create the person you are and the activities you perform. Now let's look closer at this amazing organ. And I love this book because it's got all these little side notes. The human brain and nervous system regulates all body functions, including the beating of your heart, the way you smile, and what you feel and think. It's a pretty powerful organ. The brain and the spinal cord. Now, do you know where the spinal cord is? Well, have you ever heard people refer to as your spine that goes down your back? Well, that's a series of vertebrae, which inside actually is housed your spinal cord. And that connects to all the other nerves around your brain, around your body, and to your brain. The brain looks like a soft pinkish gray sponge. It looks and feels a little like stiff gelatin and is wrinkled like a giant walnut. It rests inside your skull, which safely protects it from bumps and jolts. 3 layers of membrane, thin sheets of body tissue, and a cushion of fluid give it extra protection. It's pretty cool, the things our body does to keep it safe. Your brain weighs less than 3 pounds and contains billions of individual nerve cells, also called neurons. Although it makes up only about 2% of the adult's body weight, it needs 20% of the body's blood and oxygen to nourish all of its cells and fuel its processes. And here's a little note. Your brain is protected by your skull, which is made up of 22 bones. It's kind of an interesting fact because we always think of our skull as one piece, but it's actually made up of a lot of smaller pieces. And when we're born, those pieces actually aren't connected. They slowly fuse together over time. A network of blood vessels brings oxygen and blood sugar to your brain cells. If you don't get enough oxygen or sugar, your brain can't function, and you'll get dizzy and confused within just a minute or 2. You might even faint. Then after only 4 to 8 minutes without oxygen, your brain can become damaged. You could even die. Super important that our lungs are important to keeping our brain healthy. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brainstem, and another area called the limbic system. All of them work together, but each has its own role to play. Here's our little side note. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. And we're going to learn about those different sections. The cerebrum. The cerebrum makes up 7/10 of your brain, and it does most of your brain's work. 7/10 is a lot of the brain. It has a heavy folded surface. In fact, if you unfolded this covering, the pattern created by the folds is different in every human being. Your brain does most of the work here, including thinking, decision making, joking, and moving. So if you unfolded it, it would create a crazy cool pattern. You can't actually unfold it. Let's see what our little note. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, and it's divided into two parts called hemisphere: the right side of your brain and the left side of your brain. I guarantee you, throughout your life, you're going to hear people talk about right brain and left brain. The outer layer of the cerebrum, called the cortex, helps you move your voluntary muscles. Voluntary muscles are those you can move just by thinking about it. If you want to turn a page of a book, for instance, one area of your cerebrum sends a signal to one small part of your cortex. Whenever you raise your arm, your brain sends a signal through hundreds of thousands of nerve cells to tell the muscles in your arm to move. You may not even know that your brain's sending those signals because you've thought, oh, I need to move my hand. Your brain sends out those messages without you even having to think about it. The cortex then passes on the information to the motor area of the brain. A signal flashes down to the muscle in your hand and arm, telling them to turn the page, and all of this activity happens in less time than it takes for you to blink. Pretty amazing. Ooh. The cerebellum. Located just below the cerebrum and is behind the brainstem is the cerebellum. This part of the brain is only 1/8 the size of the cerebellum, but it performs the most essential tasks. I think that's 1/8 the size of the cerebrum. That's a typo in this book. The cerebellum's main job is to send messages to the muscles of the body about balance and precise movement. Ooh. It makes sure your body muscles work together smoothly. It also helps your body remember how to move. The next time you walk down the stairs, notice that you don't have to figure out the distance between each step. You just go. That's your cerebellum at work. And have you ever been walking down a staircase that seems uncomfortable? And maybe because it isn't a traditional staircase. I know in older homes, some staircases, especially going down to the basement, the steps aren't as wide. It's kind of scary, and that's because our brain isn't used to it. Now, the brainstem. The brainstem helps maintain some of your body's automatic activities. It keeps your heartbeat steady, your breathing regular, and your digestive efficient without you even having to think about it. While you exercise, the brainstem tells your lungs to inhale more oxygen. If you become frightened, it tells your heart to beat faster and your muscles to tense, just in case you have to run away. The brainstem also triggers reflexes, such as sneezing and swallowing. Because these functions are vital to life, a blow to the back of the head can be deadly if it damages the brainstem. And here's a little note. The brainstem helps control involuntary, unconscious body function. Remember, voluntary is our muscles when we know we got to move something. Involuntary means it does it without us having to think about it. Our heartbeat, our breathing, and our blood pressure. The limbic system. You can think of the limbic system as the home of your emotions and moods. In the limbic system, several areas of the brain work together. It is here you can connect feelings with strong physical reactions. Fear with a fast heartbeat, for instance. Emotions such as anger, fear, and joy are all organized in the limbic system. Your limbic system also influences how you form memories. Here's our note. Deep within your brain lies the limbic system. You can see it in the illustration next to our story. When you feel pleasure or anger, for instance, your limbic system may have helped your brain recognize those emotions. So this little section is actually in the center of our brain. Now, memories are storage places of information. Scientists think that in order to create memories, nerve cells form new molecules and new connections. No single region of your brain stores all the memories because the storage site depends on the type of the memory. And you may be thinking, Mr. Ewing, what kind of type of memory? Well, we have visual memories, smell, like when we smell an apple pie, if your mom ever, or someone in your family's ever made an apple pie, and you may bring back a memory of that smell. So depending on those type of memories, storage of those memories are in different parts. For example, you hold information about riding a bike in the motor areas of your brain, while the auditory areas hold the words to your favorite song. Auditory means speech. Without memory, you could not learn anything, because as soon as you saw, heard, or felt something, you would forget it. And here's our little note. Different parts of your brain are responsible for different activities you perform. When you ride a bike, for instance, the motor area of your brain work to make it possible. It's really amazing. Now here's the spinal cord. Remember, in the back section, the back of our body. Your brain, along with your spinal cord, make up the central nervous system. Reach around and feel the bones of your spine with your fingers. Those bony segments you feel form the spinal column, which protects the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a cable of sorts of nerve tissue that transmits messages to and from the brain and the rest of your body. So your brain sends all of its messages to every inch of your body through that spinal cord. In the average size adult, the spinal cord is about 17 inches in length. It is about as wide as your finger. 31 pairs of spinal nerves connect the spinal cord to the nerves of the rest of your body. The spinal nerves relay sensory information to the brain. They also carry signals from the brain to the muscles, telling them to move. So cool. You've got some nerve. The nerves branch out into every part of the body, make up what is called the peripheral nervous system. Some peripheral nerves receive information from your skin, internal organs, and outside world. These nerves are called sensory nerves. Motor nerves work to move your voluntary muscles, and autonomic nerves regulate the internal organs and glands to make sure your body maintains its internal harmony. It's a lot of work going on inside our body that we don't even know is happening. There are two types of autonomic nerves. The sympathetic nerves excite the body, speeding up its processes in response to stimuli, and the parasympathetic nerves brings the processes back to normal. So they work together to go excited and then bring us back down. When you run, your sympathetic nerves speed up your heart rate, tense your muscles, and get you breathing hard. When you relax, your parasympathetic nerve return your heartbeat, level of muscle tension, and breathing back to normal. All without you even thinking about it. How nerves work. The brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves are made up of neurons. Most neurons are so small that they can only be seen under a microscope, a really powerful microscope. Each neuron contains three important parts: the central body, the dendrites, and the axon. Now what we're seeing here is actually some nerve endings in our neurons and our axons. We can't see it with what we call the naked eye. We have to use a microscope, and a super strong, powerful microscope. Now, would really be a great time to take a pause and do some research on what an neuron looks like under a microscope. Messages from other nerve cells enter the cell body through the dendrites, branch-like projections extending from the cell body. Once the central cell body processes the message, it can pass the information on to the next nerve cell. It does this through a cable-like fiber called the axon. It's really, truly amazing. I'd love to be a scientist that studies this kind of work. I wonder what kind of scientist does this kind of work. I bet you could find that information for me. However, there's a gap between the axon of one neuron and the dendrites of another. That gap is called a synapse. For a message to make it across this gap, it requires the help of a certain chemical called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are made in the cell body and stored in the axon of a nerve cell. Ooh, let's read our little note. Tiny fibers called dendrites transmit messages from one neuron to the other, and you can see it in our illustration. Those almost like tree-like branches that are coming out from the center of that nerve cell. When a cell is ready to send a message, its axon releases a certain type of neurotransmitter, which allows the message to pass to the next nerve cell. It speeds faster than you can imagine. Information zips through your body from one neuron to another in just this way. So cool how our body works. Don't you think that's really amazing? Information about everything, from movement to speech to what we see and taste, travel to and from our brain through the nervous system from all parts of our body. It looks like a crazy network of nerve ending cells, everything. When things go wrong, and sometimes things in our body go wrong. Sometimes it's caused by something outside of our body, and sometimes it's just what happens in our body. Let's find out. Most of the time, our brain and nervous system works just fine. However, there are some diseases, injuries, and common ailments that could cause problems, like injuries. Severe blows or wounds to the head and spinal cord can affect the way the brain and nervous system works. But it's why athletes wear all that protective gear, especially football players and other sports that wear helmets to protect our brain. A concussion occurs when the brain moves suddenly within the skull after a blow to the head. It causes a loss of consciousness, vomiting, and severe headaches. A concussion rarely causes severe damage, but it does require immediate medical attention. Injuries to the spinal cord can result in a loss of movement in the body called paralysis. Headaches. And believe me, Mr. Ewing has had them, and I bet you've probably had one too. Headaches are one of the most common problems, even among young people. The most common kind of headache occurs when the muscles of the neck and head and neck tense up. This is actually called a tension headache. Learning to relax is one of the best ways to help this type of headache. Another kind of headache, called a migraine, results from blood vessels on the scalp near the eye or in the neck expanding and causing pressures. Doctors have several different medications that treat migraines. Here's our note. This woman appears to have a tension headache, which occurs when the muscles of the head and the neck become tense. That's the most common type of headache. Migraines aren't as common. Epilepsy. About 1 in every 100 people is affected by epilepsy. This disorder involves a disturbance of electrical signals in the brain, which alters consciousness and can cause involuntary movement called seizures. Often the cause of epilepsy is unknown. Doctors can help people with epilepsy control their disease through medication and other treatments. Strokes. Strokes are a form of brain damage that occur when something such as a blood clot interrupts the blood flow to the brain. Blood normally brings oxygen and nutrients to the brain cells. Remember early in our story we talked about the importance of oxygen in the blood sugar getting to our brain. A stroke actually occurs when that flow is blocked. If the brain lacks blood, then cells die. Strokes usually happen to older people who have heart disease or high blood pressure, but strokes can actually happen at different times in different people's lives. Keep moving and thinking. There are no specific foods to eat or exercise routines to follow to keep your brain and nervous system healthy. But make sure you eat a balanced diet and get plenty of rest. Sleep is actually really important. Why do you think sleep would be important to our brain? What do you think? You should also plan to exercise on a regular basis, not only for your body, but also your mind. Research shows that the more you learn, the stronger your brain power will be throughout your life. You should also take precautions to prevent a brain injury. We talked about those helmets in sports. Wearing a helmet while you ride a bike, inline skating, or practicing contact sports. You should always wear a seatbelt when you're in a car. That's actually to help hold our body in place, but also help protect our brain. You want your brain to last your whole life, so start now to keep it safe and healthy and vital. That's The Brain by Suzanne LeVere. To get more information and learn more about your brain, go out and do a little research. Find out how big your brain is when you're born and how big it is when you become an adult, and if there's much difference in size. You'll be surprised on that one. I hope you enjoyed The Brain by Suzanne LeVere.